This is a full story. Kitten wishes you all a happy and enjoyable story. I'm Rocky. That day, I was just bored, so I decided to help a friend out at the KTV for a day. I wanted to show off my 8-pack abs to a beautiful girl, but instead, I ended up with red wine splashed all over my face by Hailey's fiancé, Tony. Damn it, are you the one seducing my wife? Furious, Tony grabbed me by the collar. When he saw my face, he burst out laughing. I thought it was someone else. Turns out it's the bankrupt Rocky. So, what now? Reduced to selling yourself to pay off debts? I wiped the wine off my face and said, "This suit costs $800,000. With wine stains, it's unwearable. Will you be paying by card or cash?" Tony gave me an incredulous look and laughed heartily. Huh, are you out of your mind? Selling you wouldn't even cover $800,000. How dare you try to scam me with a fake? My former good buddy, now Tony's lackey, stuttered. Master Tony H, he might be telling the truth. In the luxurious private room, with romantic lighting and slow blues playing softly, Manager Lee pushed the door slightly open and gestured for me to look inside. Under the dim lights, Hailey was having a great time with one of my younger models. I nodded at him and pushed the door open. As soon as I entered, several gazes turned toward me. Who ordered this gorgeous guy? He's so handsome, like a male star. A drunk, short-haired woman naturally draped her hand over my waist and then lifted a bottle of wine, saying to the crowd, "I want him. No one is allowed to take him from me." Hearing this, Hailey turned her head. When she saw me, she was stunned. "Rocky, do you know him?" The short-haired woman asked Hailey with curiosity. "Not personally, just heard that the top male escort at Huangue is Rocky." Hailey pretended to stay calm, took a sip of her drink, but her eyes kept darting toward me. Her possessiveness was almost overflowing, ignoring the younger model next to her trying to offer her a drink. Sensing her companion's envy, the short-haired girl leaned in close to my ear and flirted. "I've been to Huangue several times, but I've never seen someone as handsome as you. Are you new here?" She intentionally glanced at Hailey. Hailey's hand gripped her glass so tightly it turned white. She looked at me and couldn't hold back anymore, standing up to try and grab my hand. I took a step back, avoiding her reach. Just as I was about to speak, a loud crash interrupted me. "Hailey, you bitch, we're about to get married, and you're out here fooling around?" That rough voice could only belong to Tony. Hailey and I were each other's first loves. In our junior year, I introduced her to my family. My family was considered among the top tier in Longqing, so my mother was initially somewhat disdainful of Hailey, who came from a small town and whose father was imprisoned. But after my repeated insistence, my mother agreed to let us marry after graduation. She even used her connections to get Hailey a decent and stable job. However, by the time of our senior year graduation, my family went bankrupt. My father passed away, and my mother fell seriously ill. Instead of becoming my comfort, Hailey criticized me for not buying her gifts and not caring about her anymore, constantly arguing that she wanted to break up. "Did I cause your family's bankruptcy? You're always so stingy. Isn't it that you don't love me anymore?" "Yes, your mother found me a job, but how do people at the company talk about me? Connections, parachutes, you don't know how harshly they insult me. Didn't I have pressure too? Even if your mother is willing to find me a job, I didn't want it. If your family hadn't gone bankrupt, would I be targeted like this?" At first, I thought, after all, we had been childhood sweethearts. With such a major change in my family, not being able to provide her with a wealthy life was my fault. She had to endure hardship with me, so I endured it. But to my surprise, she became even more extreme, even going to my mother's sickbed to ask why my mother wasn't dead yet, saying that living was wasting my money. My mother was so upset that she almost didn't survive that night. Because of this, Hailey and I broke up completely. The next day, she officially announced her relationship with another wealthy second generation, Tony. That was when I realized that as soon as my family went bankrupt, Hailey had already secretly gotten involved with Tony. On the day when I, unable to rush back to be with my mother for her birthday and was berated and blocked by her, Hailey and Tony had spent the whole night in a hotel together. And the next day, like a foolish dog, I dragged my tired body to buy flowers and begged for forgiveness downstairs at her apartment. Hailey, just getting out of Tony's car, took a photo of my back and posted it on her secondary account with the caption, "Lickspittle." Her friends all commented with laughter, mocking my foolishness along with her. In a fit of anger, I left Longqing with my mother and moved south to start a new venture. And that departure lasted 5 years. Damn it, you're using my stuff and then dare to find a male model behind my back? Hailey, who was about to confront me, screamed and ducked behind me. Tony's face flushed red. He grabbed my collar and poured the wine from the table all over my face. The dark red liquid dripped from my hair onto the white collar of my shirt. shirt, soaking me completely. He suddenly stopped, furrowed his brow, and scrutinized my face for a moment. "Rocky." I bent down, took a tissue, and slowly wiped the wine stains off my face. Tony sneered. "I thought it was someone else. Turns out it's the young master, Rocky. No wonder we haven't seen you in years. So, after graduation, you went on to work at the club. A young master is still a young master, huh?" He spoke with a sarcastic tone. Then he yelled at Hailey behind me. "Seriously, honey, what kind of taste do you have? You're messing with this trash? If you want to play, at least go for something decent. Aren't you afraid of getting sick?" Tony made a dismissive noise and sprawled out on the sofa, spreading his legs. "You must be the waiter here? Bring me a fruit platter, strawberries without seeds, and durians without thorns." I tossed the tissue I used to wipe my face into the trash can and replied, "Sure." Tony curled his lips in disdain, waiting to watch the drama unfold. I continued, "But first, we need to settle our personal matters. This suit costs $800,000. With wine stains, it's unwearable. Will you be paying by card or cash?" His expression changed. "What nonsense are you spouting? A suit for $800,000? Do you think you're wearing gold?" I smiled, took off my jacket, and showed him the label. "This is a Khitan bespoke suit, recently arrived. You can get the receipt from the manager." Tony glanced at me. "Who are you trying to fool? Keep pretending. Go on, I'll just sit here and watch." Hailey tugged at my sleeve and whispered, "Rocky, I know you want to stand up for me, but there's no need to tell such a far-fetched lie." I subtly shifted my position. Stand up for her? I wonder where she gets the nerve. This is indeed a genuine bespoke suit. "Tom, you're in the second-hand luxury goods business. Come take a look." Tony waved at his lackey in the corner. Tom was my best friend in college. When his family was in trouble, I donated money to help them through the crisis. Though he frequently took advantage of me, I always turned a blind eye since his family was poor. But after my family went bankrupt, he was the first to cut ties with me. Moreover, Hailey and Tony got together through his connections. Tom walked over with a look of disdain and reluctantly took the jacket from my hands, turning on his phone flashlight, muttering, "He's just a poor guy. How could he afford such high-end goods? It must be a fake pretending to be high-end." As Tom belittled me, Tony was smugly shaking his head. The sound abruptly stopped. Tony, displeased, snapped, "Keep talking. Why are you silent now?" Tom turned around, trembling slightly as he held the suit. "Master Tony, this seems to be genuine." Tony was startled, jumped up, and yelled, "Impossible. Take another look." Tom, with a distressed face, said, "Bro, it's definitely real. The craftsmanship, the stitching, it's Khitan's work. A replica can't reach this level." Hailey leaned in closer, her eyes a mix of curiosity and suspicion. "Rocky, didn't your family go bankrupt? How can you still afford such high-end goods? Has your family regained its wealth?" Her tone carried a hint of subtle hope. I didn't respond, letting Hailey draw her own conclusions. She subtly touched my arm with the back of her hand, her expression eager. "Can't you afford it?" I deliberately provoked Tony. "Just $800,000, the cost of a suit. Tony's family wouldn't try to dodge payment, would they?" He slammed the sofa and, gritting his teeth, said to the stunned young model, "Go get your manager. I refuse to believe I have to pay for this poor fool." Manager Lee rushed to the scene. Seeing the damaged door, his eyes immediately turned sharp. Facing Tony's inquiry, he took a discreet glance at me before speaking slowly. "This suit was indeed purchased from the store. We have the receipt and invoice. If Mr. Tony is unwilling to compensate the full amount, our boss said you could at least cover the dry cleaning fee." "Ugh, so it's from the store." Tony sighed in relief, his gaze toward me becoming even more arrogant. "It's just a store-bought suit. You act like it's something prestigious." Tom, eager to please Tony, chimed in, "Stop pretending. Poor is poor. You're even selling yourself to pay off debts, and you still think you're a young master? You're way off compared to Tony." Tony's eyes narrowed with satisfaction. During this exchange, Hailey subtly moved away from me. I kept my face neutral, but sneered inwardly. "Please speak respectfully. This is a legitimate establishment." Manager Lee's tone turned stern, clearly disapproving. "All our staff members are professionally trained. They are not the kind of unprofessional service workers you might encounter elsewhere. Given that this gentleman is new to Huanggu, I can overlook his rude behavior." His words were directed at Tom, but his gaze was sharp toward Tony. "As for the repair cost for the door, Huanggu will handle it this time. Mr. Tony, please be more considerate in the future. Damaged doors are minor, but But if your leg is injured or if Tony's family's reputation is harmed, that's a different story. You, Tom, furious, tried to speak but shrank back under Tony's glare and retreated to the corner. The crowd whispered. Manager Lee is backed by the new elite of launching. Tony's family can't afford to offend him. Tony's really got guts, causing trouble at Huangue. If his father finds out his son's messing up with a major client, who knows how he'll be dealt with? Tony's expression darkened, and Tom looked disgruntled. After Manager Lee left, the two were clearly displeased. Tony, still fuming, turned his attention to Hailey, finally remembering the day's main issue. He stepped up and yelled at Hailey. You said you were going shopping. How did you end up in this place? And why is Rocky here too? Hailey, ever the expert in deflecting blame, responded. How would I know? Rocky just showed up right in front of me. Am I supposed to control his feelings for me? Noticing Tony's increasingly dark expression, she quickly changed the subject. Today was supposed to be our girls' night out. A few of us just wanted to have fun. The male models were all ordered by them. Ask them if you don't believe me. Several women around quickly waved their hands, confirming it. Clearly not wanting to get involved in the couple squabbles, they admitted that they had ordered the male models themselves. With her friends backing her up, Hailey became more spirited. She plopped down on the sofa, tears welling in her eyes as if she was full of grievances. Looking up, she gazed at Tony with a pitiful expression. Tony's anger evaporated instantly. It's no wonder Hailey has Tony wrapped around her finger to the point of discussing marriage. Apparently, Tony is quite taken in by her manipulation. As I was about to laugh at him, I couldn't help but remember how Hailey had foolishly played me like a puppet back in the day. I almost wanted to slap myself and call myself a fool. Hailey, crying, asked the key question. How did you know I was here? Did someone report me? Tony quickly comforted her, showing a mysterious text on his phone. Look, I don't know who sent this. The screen displayed a prominent message. Hailey is at Huangue room 501. Come quickly and catch her in the act. Without hesitation, Hailey grabbed the phone and dialed the number. She muttered angrily, I'll see which bitch is trying to mess with me. Before she could finish, a ringtone rang out among the crowd. Everyone held their breath, straining to locate the sound, eventually turning their eyes toward me. It's you, Tony shouted furiously and lunged toward me. I retreated quickly into the hallway. You can't stand to see me and Hailey happy, can you? I'll tell you, even before you two broke up, I was already with Hailey. She said you didn't dare touch her, that you were a useless waste. Is that so? I remember Hailey made a lot of effort to seduce me, and I refused. I held her and seriously told her that I wanted to wait until marriage for such things, that I wanted to protect her, but behind my back, she called me old-fashioned, an idiot, and said that I must have problems in that area to avoid her. It's laughable. Just as Tony was about to punch me, a drunken middle-aged man blocked his view. Tony was about to explode, but upon seeing the face below the fist, he was startled and quickly apologized. His voice was filled with ingratiation. Mr. He, what are you doing here? I didn't recognize you. Please don't take it personally. Mr. He didn't even look at him and roared. Who the hell are you? Didn't you see I'm here to toast Rocky? He raised his glass unsteadily toward me. Rocky, I'm toasting you. It's thanks to you that we secured the Rue Kai project. No, Mr. He, you must have mistaken him, Tony exclaimed in shock. This is my college classmate. His family went bankrupt long ago. He's here as a male model. Bame, holding his glass, fumed. What nonsense are you talking? This is Rocky, the president of Universal. Are you blind? Watch your mouth. Bame was a target of Tony's family's sycophancy. His outburst made Tony's face lose color, standing frozen with alternating shades of red and white. I was startled, fearing that Bame might expose my true identity, so I quickly gave him a subtle signal. Receiving my hint, Bame squinted, smacked his forehead. Look at my memory. I'm drunk and mistook people. He patted my shoulder. Young man, please forgive me. With that, he turned and walked out of the room. I quickly followed his steps out of the private room. Before I had taken more than a few steps, Tony's furious shout rang out. Rocky, you'd better stop. Tony didn't expect me to leave with Bame. His friends cowered in the elevator corner, intimidated by Bame's presence, too scared to approach. Seeing Tony's frustrated expression, I couldn't help but smirk. He silently mouthed, "You'll regret this later." But he didn't know that everything happening today, including the messages, the trap, and everything that occurred, was all part of my pre-planned scheme. I would never forget Tony's mockery and taunts. He had made things difficult for me when I worked at his place, forcing me to apologize in humiliating ways. Then he took photos and posted them online, making me a subject of ridicule. And when my mother, in a desperate situation, had to work as a cleaner at school to make ends meet, Tony and Hailey locked her in a public restroom on the 6th floor. I searched all night for her. She fainted in the restroom due to low blood sugar and nearly died. Hailey dismissed dismissed it as a prank, claiming it was payback for my mother's previous high-handedness. She hated my mother so much that she wanted to trample her underfoot. In anger, I cursed Hailey, and she immediately changed her demeanor, cursing me and my mother to death. Tony, to protect her, along with his lackeys, broke my ribs. Enduring their humiliation, I eventually left Longqing after graduating. They mocked me as a defeated dog. What they didn't know was that over the past 5 years, I worked hard in the South and finally set up an elaborate trap, just waiting for them to walk right into it. Sure enough, as soon as Tony left the private room, Hailey sent me a reconciliation message. I know you're doing this because you can't let go of me, that you still love me. Rocky, I made mistakes in the past. After being with Tony, I realized we're not suited for each other. After being away from you for so many years, I realize you're the one I truly love. Rocky, can you forgive me? I replied, sure, but you need to break up with Tony first. There was a pause on the other end, indicating that she was typing. I smiled as I locked my phone. Hailey couldn't be sure if I was still the broke kid from back then, so she couldn't let go of Tony's cash cow. She reached out, probably hoping I'd become her secret lover, enjoying Tony's power and wealth while savoring my looks and affection, and maybe seeing if I had succeeded in the South. Hailey's attempt to win me back was merely fueled by her desire to regain control over me, spurred on by today's events. She thought she had me in her grasp, but little did she know this was a sweet trap I had set specifically for her. Tony followed me down the elevator. In front of Bame, he didn't dare to act too aggressively. He kept a careful distance from me, pretending to look for his car, but his eyes were fixed on me with malicious intent. When I approached a black Rolls-Royce, everyone's expression changed dramatically. This guy didn't really make money in the South, did he? I heard Tony's two lackeys whispering among themselves. Even Tom's eyes flickered with suspicion. Tony's expression darkened. When I drove away from the Rolls-Royce in my little scooter, Tony's expression slightly eased, and his group burst into laughter. I told you, that's where his money comes from. Selling himself and still able to drive that kind of car? Give him credit, but with his kind, he's not even fit to be our young master's shoe shiner. I ignored them, quietly putting the Rolls-Royce key back in my pocket and zipping up my jacket. As I saw Bame follow me out of the garage and turn in the opposite direction, Tony, regaining his arrogance, pursued me. Noting their increasingly pressing pursuit, I had a flash of inspiration and led them to a densely populated old residential neighborhood. The sound insulation was so poor that even a snore could be heard clearly from the opposite side. Taking advantage of my scooter's speed, I reached the floor 3 minutes early and stopped in front of a door. Tony followed closely, parking downstairs. I pretended to fumble for my keys, delaying time so that Tony could see my exact location. Hearing a noise, a man opened the door slightly, looking surprised and asking, "Rocky, what are you doing here?" Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Tony downstairs with a baseball bat, closing the door and quickly slipping inside. I said, "Do you want the house or not? Just lie down on the floor, and someone will send each of your 3 guys a house." 3 burly men rubbed their hands together and grinned at me, their faces full of naivete. "Rocky, is there such a good thing?" I closed the door and waited quietly as their footsteps approached, eventually stopping outside my door. Tony didn't expect the iron door to open with a single kick. He also didn't expect that when he ordered his men to smash things, 3 more burly men would suddenly burst out, joining in the destruction with even more fervor than his own men. He was even less prepared for the fact that when the upstairs aunt and the police arrived, the 3 crazed men immediately lay on the floor, clutching the police officer's legs, crying out that someone had broken into their home and damaged private property. By the time they were taken to the police station, Tony realized the situation and shouted indignantly. But with the evidence stacked against him, no amount of shouting could help. Tony's family was in a crucial period of attracting investment. To protect their reputation, Tony's family had to pay each of my 3 bodyguards $800,000 in compensation and have them sign a settlement agreement. Wang Million grinned as he looked at the numbers in his bank account, flashing his big smile and calling out to me, "Boss, if there's another opportunity like this, remember to call me." Tony, freshly released from the station, had bloodshot eyes and looked like he wanted to kill me on the spot. I put on my sunglasses, gave him the middle finger, and opened the door to the nearby Rolls-Royce. The 3 burly men sat in the car, lined up neatly. Tony furrowed his brows and hurried over. "This car is yours? What's your relationship with Bame? He deliberately let you out." I adjusted my sunglasses and replied, "Bame calls me President Rocky. What kind of relationship could we have? Of course, it's the kind of relationship where Tony's family has to to call me Daddy. Do you think I've been idly eating in the South for the past 5 years? Damn, he blurted out a curse. I gave him a casual glance. If you don't mind the He family and the Tony family cutting ties, I can tolerate you continuing to curse. Tony's face turned red, but he didn't dare to threaten me further. Seeing his frustrated expression, I let out a long sigh. I took the driver's seat and drove away. In the rearview mirror, I saw Tony, face flushed, kicking over a row of shared bicycles. Hailey's phone call came through right after I received news that I'd become one of Dragon City's top billionaires. I know you're against Tony and want me to break up with him, but I'm really in a tough spot right now. Her tone was filled with desperation. I sneered. What tough spot? It was just her greed for Tony's money. With a sigh of resignation, she continued. Rocky, I truly love you and hope you can forgive me. What happened back then wasn't my intention. Tony forced me to act that way. He said if I followed his orders, it would prove I had really moved on from you. I was angry and ended up doing those ridiculous things because I listened to him. But after everything that happened, I know you still have a place for me in your heart. That's why I mustered the courage to come back to you, then break up with him. I was about to hang up, exasperated. Hailey's voice became tearful. I can't break up with him. His family is powerful, and if they know I left him for you, they'll target you. Besides, if I stay with him, I can get more money from him, which would be beneficial for our future, wouldn't it? Hailey had no moral qualms, smoothly shifting all the blame onto clueless Tony and painting herself as a pitiful flower. But I knew all too well. The things that happened before were all planned by Hailey herself. Tony was nothing more than a clueless fool. It was Hailey who, feeling snubbed by my mother, came to humiliate her right after my family went bankrupt. She even spread rumors in college about my mother earning $100 a night. How many people had looked down on my mother and harassed her because of that rumor? How many lecherous men had bothered her, believing those false claims? Yet my mother still smiled and comforted me, telling me it was nothing. I never knew that the university's cleaning staff could be so cruel. They made my mother do the dirtiest and most exhausting tasks, ostracized her, and even locked her out of the dormitory on a cold winter night while she was trying not to disturb the roommates by calling me to check in. If it hadn't been for a kind-hearted junior who took my mother in that night, I might have truly lost her. So, no matter how slick Hailey's words were, they only made me more nauseated. But now was not the time to expose her. After Hailey's repeated pleas, I agreed to meet her after some time. The KTV manager knocked on the door. Rocky, Tony's wedding invitation has arrived. Will you attend? I nodded slightly, then swiped open the screen on my phone to view the photos sent by the private detective. I enlarged each one for a closer look. Since Hailey and Tony were so close, Tony was obviously no saint. He professed his love for Hailey, but was secretly keeping a mistress. The first thing he did after my little scheme was to visit his mistress. I had memorized the girl's apartment number and, for months ago, instructed manager Zhao to buy the vacant apartment next door. I did a simple renovation and moved in. The girl loved walking her dog, so I got one too. As time passed, she became familiar with me. One day, I invited her to dinner. I envy you for having a partner who cherishes and loves you, I said. The girl hesitated, touching her designer bag. After several drinks, with tears in her eyes, she confided that her boyfriend refused to marry her and avoided the topic of marriage every time it came up. When I asked her the reason, she hesitated and didn't answer directly. She only said her boyfriend might be averse to marriage and that convincing him would be difficult. I understood. She wasn't entirely innocent. Men are most concerned about their own children. Once there's a baby, getting him to marry you will be a piece of cake, I deliberately suggested. Really? Her eyes lit up. I'm a man. Aren't I clear about this? Though he says he doesn't want kids, once it happens, he'll be begging you to marry him. The girl's eyes sparkled with a new idea. She quickly made excuses about her door being open and rushed home. Soon, I heard the doorbell ringing on her end. The video doorbell showed Tony's face. I lived next door, and the doorbell footage recorded Tony's increasingly frequent visits over the past 4 months. The girl's belly was visibly starting to show. So on Friday, I called Hailey and invited her to my house. She gave an ambiguous chuckle on the other end of the phone. She asked if I missed her, but I didn't take the bait and sent her the address directly. I timed it perfectly when Tony left the house next door. As expected, they met head-on. Didn't you go on a trip? Aren't you working overtime at the company? Who is this bitch? Hailey's scream drowned out Tony's question. She boldly pulled the girl behind Tony and slapped her without hesitation. Tony grabbed her hand and roared. What are you doing? Hailey's face twisted with anger. Well, you dare to cheat and protect the mistress? I'll kill you, you dog couple. Enough. If you keep screaming, you'll attract people and show how embarrassing you are. Stop it, Hailey. Tony threw her heavily to the ground. Hailey's hand was caught on the iron gate, and it was immediately scraped and cut. The glaring blood dispersed her last bit of sanity. She screamed while tearing Tony's clothes and kicked the door behind them, pulling Tony to the ground. The two people were entangled on the ground, fighting fiercely. Hailey almost scratched Tony's face to pieces. The red scratches all over his face made me shocked. The girl panicked, covering her stomach with her hand and pressing my doorbell for help, afraid that I would really come out of the door. Hailey's face visibly panicked, kicked Tony in the face, and quickly pulled the girl's hand away. Seeing Hailey pounce on the girl, Tony kicked her over. Hailey fell to the ground motionless, without a sound, blood slowly oozing out of her head. The girl who witnessed all this turned pale and slowly fell to the ground along the door frame. Tony was stunned and sat paralyzed in front of my door, and I, hiding behind the door, dialed the police. Yes, it's the Pearl City community. Someone is intentionally injuring others. To my surprise, Tony didn't go to jail. Hailey was not in any life-threatening danger either. After more than a month of recovery, she was discharged from the hospital. Tony's family, because she didn't pursue it and the son's affair first, felt even more guilty towards her. I heard they gave her $5 million directly. Hailey's life, on the contrary, became more prosperous. By the way, Hailey, wearing a wig, poured me a glass of red wine. I have to thank you. If you didn't happen to live there, I wouldn't have met that dog couple. I silently listened to her complaints. Tony is really confused. Just because he had a child with that woman, he actually wanted to break up with me? Now the child is gone. The old man of Tony's family also realized that I, the prospective daughter-in-law, am sensible, forcing Tony to marry me honestly. God is really helping me. Hailey slowly leaned on my shoulder, her face intoxicated, her fingers stroking my chest through the shirt. I couldn't help but feel a chill. Hailey wanted to take things further with me, but I made an excuse and hid in the bathroom, turning on the real-time surveillance on my phone. The screen clearly showed that after I left, Hailey's expression suddenly turned cold. Her brightly colored fingertips jabbed viciously into the sashimi on the table. "Sis," a sickly sweet male voice came through the monitor to my ears. This voice was very familiar. It was the young male model from the club. You guessed it right. Rocky is indeed not a rich guy. He just did a little business in the South and made a little money. He even has a little artist as a girlfriend. Hailey's face gradually relaxed. I've long guessed it. He suddenly found me. Things will not be so simple. The other side wondered. With Tony's family behind you, isn't it easy to crush a small boss like him? Hailey was angry. What do you know? You say this, Rocky. I've humiliated him so much, but he can still make up with me as before, willing to be my lover? Who would believe such a good thing? His sudden return to Long City this time is definitely not simple. Bame's attitude towards him is unusual. I have tested him, afraid that he has a backer behind him. But now, knowing his background, I'm relieved. Only the group of fools in Tony's family can be fooled by him. A small character like him can't make any waves. She looked at her manicure and sneered. I want to give him a lesson first. Let him know that it's not so easy to retaliate against me. Suddenly, she changed her tone and her voice became particularly sweet. I haven't seen you for a long time. I really miss you. If it weren't for Tony being forced by the old man to come to see me every day, I would have come to find you. That useless thing has long been hollowed out by wine and lust. How can it compare with you? The voice on the other end was ambiguous. Sister, I miss you too. Hailey giggled and said word by word to the other end. Then you must satisfy me next time. Hiding in the bathroom, I strongly held back the urge to vomit. I recorded their conversation without missing a word. Hailey must have never thought that even this young male model was arranged by me according to her taste, a link in the plan. That day, I fired him on the grounds that the young male model was indecent to the guests. He was drinking alone by the roadside, cursing me while crying. Naturally, he was taken home by Hailey, who coveted his beauty and wanted to find out about my past. I soon found out what Hailey's so-called revenge was. She dug up Shangzhan's so-called black material, a few photos of her being close with the director, and even a gif of him grabbing her chest. Hailey used marketing numbers to make a fuss, inciting the emotions of netizens, and Shangzhan's Weibo comment area was almost overwhelmed with bad reviews, scolding her for shamelessness, scolding her for getting ahead by body. But Hailey pretended to tell me. You know that new acting school flower? I tell you, she is dirty. Behind the scenes, she is not less about the big guy. Even Tony's father, she is hooked up. This person is really so dirty. She frowned, a look of disgust, but her eyes twinkled as if looking forward to my reaction. Seeing me trying to pretend to be calm and indifferent, Hailey couldn't help but smirk. I made an excuse to smoke and walked out of the private room made for her. I haven't walked far. I heard her eagerly make a phone call. No need to say more. It must be her young male model. The monitor came to her complacent voice. Knowing that the little girlfriend you have been taking care of is actually a slut, Rocky she must be disgusted to death. But that slut looks strange. Always feel like I have seen her somewhere. The young male model appropriately replied. Plastic surgery face. They all look similar. Hailey laughed. Well, when my sister is free, I will come to see you. But she didn't know that the so-called black material of Shangzhen was actually taken by me. What I want is for Shangzhen's matter to be made a fuss about, and the whole network to dig out her past and black material. On the internet, there is not only her black material, but also a past video of her being bullied. A few girls grabbed her hair and tore her clothes into pieces, laughing and evaluating her figure. The most arrogant one, with an especially pure and sweet face. Her name is Hailey. Under my operation, things quickly ushered in a reversal. Several directors and producers of the party claimed their identities, and everyone present was a famous woman in the industry. Not only did they help Shangzhen clarify the truth, but they also casually praised her for her outstanding ability and serious work, earning her a lot of popularity from passers-by. At the same time, Hailey's record of hiring marketing numbers to slander Shangzhen was exposed, and her past bullying video was also pushed to the homepage of a certain website by someone. Shangzhen's fans were furious, and after knowing that Hailey was Tony's fiancé, they went to the door of Tony's company and held high banners demanding Hailey to apologize. Hailey was forced to cry at the door of the company, even kneeling to ask for the public's forgiveness. But most people did not buy it, and as a result, Tony's company's stock price fluctuated and fell several times. I thought that at this point, Tony's company would almost completely regard Hailey as an abandoned child. But I didn't expect that this woman is indeed cunning. She has more than one way out for herself. Hailey somehow got evidence of Tony's father's corruption and forced Tony's company to wipe her buttocks, and even got the marriage certificate with Tony in advance. Hailey and Tony's wedding was held as usual. Even though Hailey's reputation was in tatters, a large number of well-known industry figures still attended her wedding thanks to Tony's company's connections in the industry. The moment I appeared at Hailey's wedding, she lifted her head proudly, like a peacock, and slowly walked towards me, holding up her dress. You're here to seek revenge, aren't you? I nodded. She gave a cold smirk, barely moving her lips, and taunted me. Presumptuous. This wedding, whether it happens or not, doesn't really matter to me, since I'm already the mistress of the Tony family. But I arranged this wedding specifically to expose you as a fraud. Hailey raised her lips in a smile. Are you satisfied now? I watched her as she raised the microphone. She methodically exposed my lies to the business tycoons in the audience. She recounted the story of how I, from a mere worker in the South, had used a carefully crafted scam to deceive these upper-class people. She even prepared a PowerPoint presentation showing several photos of me working in the South. In the photos, I was sweating profusely, my dark face full of sycophantic smiles, holding flyers and weaving through the crowd. How embarrassing, she continued, saying that my car was rented and the only thing of value was the ostentatious Imperial Club. The entire audience gasped. Only I, in the silent venue, clapped slowly for her, one clap after another. He's a fraud. He's deceived all of us. Hailey screamed hoarsely, denouncing my crimes. Tony's father looked at me in shock, momentarily at a loss for how to react. Tony, as the groom, was still absent. He was swamped with work and didn't expect Hailey, who was usually obedient, to go mad first. He rubbed his temples and roared, "Security, throw this man out. Sir, it's inappropriate to rush the guests out during the wedding banquet, isn't it?" Bame, who had arrived at the venue at some point, waved his hand casually to dismiss the security guards. He lowered his voice. "Miss Hailey, do you really think I, Bame, would collaborate with a fraud?" With his status as a business tycoon, no one dared to contradict him. His few words defused the awkward situation. Hailey was at a loss, clearly not understanding why Bame would help me even after she had exposed me as a fraud. While she stood there dumbfounded, I quietly had a video played on the big screen in the background. The venue was filled with an ambiguous voice. It was then that Hailey realized what was happening. She screamed and rushed to the screen, trying to cover her face. "It's all fake. It's all this fraud's deception." But the audio incongruously played her provocative voice. "You're much better than that dead thing, Tony." The media present went wild, snapping photos of the scene. As expected, Hailey and Tony's names were trending again on social media, not just nationally, but even globally. Tony, of course, couldn't make it to the wedding venue. Under the instigation of the little male model, Hailey had arranged a dramatic cheating scandal involving Tony to further control the Tony family. Tony's latest affair was with a married woman. Hailey personally called the woman's husband on a business trip to alert him about the situation at home. To avoid being discovered, Tony hid naked on the windowsill and had to call 911. At that moment, videos of him from the waist down were being widely circulated on various platforms. I watched with a smile as Hailey was slapped to the ground by Tony's mother and mouthed to her, "Are you satisfied now?" Her face was ashen. Hailey's findings were actually accurate. I wasn't some perfect hero from a feel-good novel, just an ordinary person who had struggled for 5 years in the South, earning far less than even one of Tony's fingers. But I wasn't willing to accept it, and neither were the people she had harmed in the past. So we came together and devised this incredible scam. From the South to Dragon City. Taking advantage of the information gap, I cleverly fabricated a group called Global and created a wealth of fake data online. Initially, no one doubted me. I even secured a massive investment. I invested all the money into developing the Imperial Club, making it even more luxurious. This ostentatious display made people trust me even more. Bame was the first person to doubt me, but after exposing my identity, he smiled and asked, "Your scam is quite interesting. If I don't expose you, could you help me with something?" The task was to help him bring down the Tony family and take over their business. I once asked Bame why, since ruining the Tony family would be a piece of cake for him, he needed a small fry like me to handle it. He laughed and told me that because of his high status, there were some things he couldn't handle directly, neither openly nor covertly. So it had to be you. After the wedding farce ended, Hailey used a pair of scissors to make Tony and her pseudo-siblings. The Tony family wanted to send Hailey to a mental hospital and then deal with her quietly. Hailey fled overnight and called the little male model for help, never suspecting that this model was actually a pawn I had placed. Shang Zhen's younger brother, James, who was the little male model I sent out, provided me with her location. I forwarded this address to the Tony family using a disposable number. The last call I received from Hailey had her gasping heavily, as if she were running for her life. "Please, let me go. Consider how I followed you since high school," she pleaded. I laughed and hung up without hesitation. The news reported that a woman had been repeatedly run over by a drunk driver and died. The Tony family was thrown into panic. Such a meticulous person as Hailey wouldn't have left things to chance. Just a week after her death, the Tony family was reported for corruption and bribery. Tony's father was sentenced, with rumors suggesting a long enough term for him to die in prison. The Tony family declared bankruptcy, and I acquired Tony's company, thriving with Bame's backing. Tony's mother called me in tears, asking why I had destroyed their family. I smiled and said, "Of course, it's because you deserve it." Then I blocked her number. Soon after, Tony was killed when a steel pipe punctured his lung during a fight, ending up dead in a garbage heap. 5 years later, Shang Zhen had become a prominent star in the industry, and James was sent abroad for further studies by me. Everyone's future looked bright. My mother, now 60, still appeared elegant and serene under my careful care, just like when Dad was still around. "Dad, look, even though you're gone, I've finally been able to care for Mom like you used to." During the long holiday, I brought 2 bottles of white wine to his grave. Years ago, the Tony family had set a trap that forced him to jump off a building to his death. He never got to drink his favorite wine before he died. Others said he was selfish, but I knew he was sick and afraid of dragging me and Mom down. I poured the wine on his grave. He loved to drink this when he was young, his face turning red and rubbing his stubble against mine. Under the influence of the wine, I poured out all the bitterness and grievances of these years. I said, "Dad, I used to rely on your protection, but I didn't realize how hard it was to be an adult. Starting from scratch is really tough. Thank you, Dad. Thank you for always silently giving, never complaining to Mom and me, always cheerful, never letting us worry, always shielding us from the storm, never letting us suffer." It sounds cliche, but in the next life, let me be your dad. Let me take care of you. Hailey was indeed a cunning person, and I wasn't sure I could win. With her backing from the Tony family, crushing me was like crushing an ant. But she didn't have the courage to gamble like I did. I risked everything and won. Story over.